On our sister series, All My Friends Have Left Here, I recently played Crazy Taxi, one of my favorite car games. The version I played was the GameCube game based on the Dreamcast game based on the original arcade game. But today we're talking about the Game Boy Advance game. Wait, the Game Boy Advance game? How do you do that? With a remarkably faithful port. That's how. Nope, it's not a top-down game. The city is in full 3D, and it looks like a PlayStation 1 era 3D game, but it's for the Game Boy Advance. And technically, the car and the customers are 2D sprites, not 3D models, but that's the trick that even games like Mario Kart 64 did. And weirdly, many of the voice samples from the original game made their way into this version too. Any way you slice it, Crazy Taxi Catch a Ride is a technical achievement. Okay, for the uninitiated, what is Crazy Taxi? Crazy Taxi is a cab driving arcade game. You pick up passengers and drop them off at different destinations as fast as possible. Getting new passengers gets you money. You have a time counter that's constantly dwindling, take too much time, and your passenger will literally jump out of your car and you won't get any money. And eventually you will run out of time. I usually make it about 5 minutes and about 6 passengers deep. As Crazy Taxi has its roots as an arcade game, it's very over the top. The cars can fly off ramps, crash into anything with no damage, and even go underwater. The car is fun to control, and it's just silly enough to make it a game that I come back to again and again. And as a home release, it's pretty thin. It has no story and no goal beyond make the best run. It only has 2 levels. They're both really large cities, and the fun comes from finding the best and most profitable routes. Oh, and there's an Offspring soundtrack that's suitably campy given the time. Crazy Taxi 1 was ported to the Sega Dreamcast and the GameCube, original Xbox, and PlayStation 2. And then it was re-released again for the Xbox 360, PS3, and Steam, albeit without the Offspring soundtrack. This was a point of contention among many, many Crazy Taxi fans. It also found its way onto iOS and Android devices too. Its sequel, Crazy Taxi 2, stayed on the Dreamcast until the first 2 games were bundled together in a PSP version called Fare Wars. And Crazy Taxi 3 took place in a Las Vegas-style city and was only released for the original Xbox, so I've never played that one. And that's it for our Crazy Taxi series overview. Let's go back to the Game Boy Advance version. Ever since I was little, I was thrifty, always looking for a deal. And I knew that often the same game came out on both the consoles and the Game Boy. Stuff like Tony Hawk or Turok or Madden would be $60 on the Nintendo 64 and only $30 on the Game Boy. And so naturally my folks and I went for the $30 version, which probably explains why this series has been recently looking at so many Game Boy downports of console games. Now, you probably know, and I definitely know, that the Game Boy versions were definitely not the same game and rarely as good and often much worse. But I fell for the idea time and time again, and so here we are with Crazy Taxi GBA, which is what it claims to be, a cheaper, portable version of Crazy Taxi. In the home version of Crazy Taxi 1, there were 2 cities, the arcade city and the original city. The arcade city first appeared in the original arcade game. When it was ported to the Dreamcast, they added the original city because it was a new original city for that version, which isn't confusing at all. Anywho, both cities are in this game, or at least reasonable facsimiles. Many of the original game's Crazy Box modes are also here. These are weird puzzles and goals divorced from the main city driving game, but they do teach you some of the crazier and more effective drift moves that will pay off in the main game. Like I said, it's a feature-rich game. Crazy Taxi GBA or Crazy Taxi Catch a Ride isn't without its problems. Right off the bat, the graphics make me nauseous. I'm not exactly sure how I thought 13 years ago this was a serviceable port of Crazy Taxi. Really not sure what I was thinking. Maybe I was so enamored with the concept of Crazy Taxi that I'd just take it any way I could get it. And the Game Boy Advance was never meant to do a game like this. It's ludicrous to even try. And yet, here we are, a 3D game on the Game Boy Advance. And though it's a marvelous technical achievement, it's more academically interesting than actually fun. Thank you for watching. That was a game, and we'll see you again next time.